Hello. So on this video I wanted to talk a little bit about the kind of philosophy or thinking behind a project that I have been working on related to social networking in the community. I suppose most people now who are online are familiar with the large monolithic social networks of the major internet players. One of the things I thought about with these large networks is they have to accommodate a generalized use case, so they have to have the functionality which is useful to the most people, and not specific functionality which is only useful to a few. So that is one thing about it. The second thing is the kind of talking to someone on the other side of the planet and not knowing the people around you in your local community. So I thought another way that I wanted to work on something was to have a more locally focused network. So combining those two things, the idea that a network can be specialized locally and focused locally, I decided to start building something along those lines. Now, my background was probably, I started working on this 6 or 7 years ago, and it's been a project which, if I get a spare few moments, I spend some time on it. So from my point of view, it's quite useful because it means I'm maximising my productive time. But previously I had been an IT contractor, and so we're in 2017 now. That ended for me about 16 years ago, so there was a gap of almost 10 years where I literally didn't go near a computer because I was doing other things in my life. So starting from that remit, the idea that I wanted to build something, I looked into what software was now available in the modern world and for building websites, and I alighted on Joomla, which I decided then to press ahead and start to see if I could build something. And when I first started using it, I found that quite a lot of the software was not mature, the components and stuff, so there was quite a few issues with them. But over this 6-7 year period, it's matured a lot, and to the point where there's some very high quality aspects to it. So that was the first part, just getting used to using the software and building a website. So what I was doing, I was using what was called shared hosting. So that means that all the server systems are under the control of a hosting provider. Now that's quite nice if all you're interested in is building a website, but my background was more systems based than that, so I was really looking for something that was going to rekindle my old skill set, if you like, and what I found was that it was quite long-winded process to actually use these shared hosting servers, because every time you needed a configuration setting changed on your server, you would have to contact your hosting provider and ask them to change it, and so that was a long-winded process for me. So I looked into using VPS systems, and at this point all I had was a kind of prototype website and the notion that I wanted to use a VPS system. So I looked around for different providers. I picked one and then started building or deployed my website, web server, database and so on, all on one machine, one VPS machine, and got it running there. So then the next thing was, I thought, well, that's not very resilient. That's not a resilient system, because if the machine has a problem, then the whole site goes down. So I split it up. So there was separate database servers and web server and so on. They all had their own separate machines, but that's still not very resilient. So I thought, how can I architect this so that it's a more resilient system? So from that point on, I began to build a framework which was going to be deployable across multiple cloud hosting services, and be extensible to other cloud hosting services as well as building in resilience and so on into the framework. The basic structure of the thing kind of developed over the months, although I had a very clear idea of what I wanted to achieve. So that was when my deployment toolkit, that's what I call a deployment toolkit, came about, and it basically automatically configures and deploys your server system based on configuration parameters that you provide from the command line. So that is the toolkit that I have been working on and will describe in and show in future videos. As far as actual real world usage then, I have my deployment toolkit, and also I have a website which I've built which is based on Joomla. So I'm perhaps not doing it full justice here, because the idea is you can take any application that runs on PHP or whatever, store it in a repository and automatically deploy it to a configured and resilient architecture. So from a user's point of view, so what you find on the internet is there's lots of different articles. This is how you configure, say, Nginx servers. This is how you configure MySQL. This is how you configure blah blah blah. And so every time somebody new comes along that wants to have their own version or their own web servers, they have to learn all this configuration stuff and all the ways that you would implement or configure web servers, Apache and so on. So what I tried to do was to abstract all of that into some build scripts, so that whilst it's still possible to change the configuration of your web server, for example, it's automatically deployed in a base configuration. So the idea of normal usage would be that somebody that wanted to deploy using this toolkit could fork their own version of it, tweak various configuration settings if they wanted to suit their use case, and then deploy with probably about 5% of the work that it would take to do from scratch their own application onto servers which they have full control and configuration over. So that's the basic philosophy or overview of the toolkit. I hope that's reasonably clear. So as you follow through on these videos, or if you use the toolkit, you'll find that there's basically a lot of readme files and so on, which I hope gives full instruction on how to make use of the toolkit. So in basic function, you'll run a script, answer various configuration options like how many megabytes you want your servers to be and how much disk space and so on. The script will run, which will take tens of minutes, and at the end of it you'll have a online web server with its own bespoke auto-scaling, or web servers, or you'll have VPS servers with their own bespoke auto-scaling and so on, which you can deploy on any one of the supported cloud hosts. And the scripts are easily extendable or extensible. You just need to have a cloud host with its own API that you can use to call from the command line to implement some very simple functionality like create server, delete server, blah blah blah. A very cleanly defined interface and simple interface to your hosting provider. I think that's probably all I want to say from a mile high overview. But if you would like to delve more into it, then obviously the code should be, well, understandable, and also the there is some documentation that you'll find if you clone the repository. So that's it really. Thanks for listening.